people hollering. Don't you hear them? A cuckoo bird.
I walked to a window and took a good look out over Baltimore and the world as far as I could see. Zora Neale Hurston.
Zora Neale Hurston, a leading voice of the Harlem Renaissance, is returning to the city after many years. It will be a bittersweet homecoming. She is receiving a high honor from her old college professors. But after a decade of the Great Depression, her income from writing has all but dried up.
Because by then she had published, three novels. And she had a number of difficult periods.
Hurston's visit to Baltimore would be a welcome relief from money struggles and a recognition of what she loved most. For 20 years, she had written on the seam where art meets real life.
If you read both Toni Morrison, and Gloria Naylor, and Alice Walker, all say that Zora empowered them to write. That reading Zora Neale Hurston made them feel that they were powerful enough to be able to write themselves. The fantastic thing about Zora is she soaked up not only language, and you hear the southern accents in the recordings, but the proverbs, the folk sayings, the amusing, phrases and whatnot. So much of that is what is delightful in Zora.
Hurston had first come to Baltimore in 1917 as a young woman on her own.
In her autobiography, she said she was passed around like a bad penny. From house to house, it was a big family. She did have a sister, Sarah, who lived here right on Lawrence Street in Baltimore, northwest Baltimore, still an African-American community.
Zora desperately wanted to go to college, but her prospects for getting into Morgan College looked bleak. She had never even finished high school.
The dean gave me a brief examination and credit for 2 years in high school. Knowing I had no money, he spoke to his wife. I was 3 years behind schedule.
In fact, she was 10 years behind, but making up for lost time fast.
She says that when she came here, she really felt at home. For the first time, she enjoyed learning, and this was a place where she wanted to be.
In Baltimore, she met teachers who opened that world for her, including an English instructor, Dwight Holmes.
There is no more dynamic teacher anywhere under any skin. He radiates newness and nerve and says to your mind, there is something wonderful to behold just ahead.
She remembered his teaching Samuel Coleridge's Xanadu, and Xanadu did Kubla Khan, a wealthy pleasure-dome decree.
A damsel with a dulcimer in a vision once I saw. It was an Abyssinian maid, and on her dulcimer she played.
And she said that it seemed that he was directing his lesson to her, and she was just soaking all of it up.
As a student, Hurston paid tribute to her teachers by painting them into her very first stories.
My first publication was on the blackboard at Morgan. I decided to write an allegory using the faculty members as characters. I went to school extra early that morning, and when the bell rang for assembly, the big board was covered with the story.
All around her, she found material for her first stories, the people, the streets, and the sounds.
This was my world, I said to myself, and I shall be in it and surrounded by it if it is the last thing I do on God's green dirt ball.
From that early experience, Hurston had gone on to pursue folklore, the stories that people tell each other, and in that field, she charted bold new paths. She continued her education at Howard University and then moved to New York to study anthropology at Barnard College.
But she finally landed in New York, right in the middle of the Harlem Renaissance, with all those bright people there, bright, young African-American writers there. Of course, that was the place for her to be, because she was quite a character.
Her lively imagination translated folklore into short stories, novels, and plays that would make African American life vital for everyone.
And she had gone into the Caribbean and done a lot of research, and scholarly research, and it had been published and so on.
But she said at one point, I hate to think of all of this glorious material gathering dust on bookshelves.
Whether in Haiti or on Florida's Gulf Coast, Hurston reached deep into the well of living culture, often at great risk to herself.
Most of the time she was alone. There's a picture of her with a gun belt around her waist and a gun in the belt, because she felt if she had to use it, she would.
The most far-reaching and the most inclusive problem of all is that of unemployment.
Now you could tell Jasmine that home girl, she don't want you around.
Hurston would not tell her Baltimore hosts, but in desperation, she had turned to a government relief job with the Federal Writers Project. Despite her personal hardships, that period, the late 1930s, found her doing some of the most important work of her life as both a writer and a folklorist. She traveled throughout Florida, collecting songs and stories in churches, juke joints, and logging camps. She turned anthropology into a tool of the people.
So then she went into the community, became a part of the community, and did something that anthropologists didn't begin doing until at least 25 years, almost 20, 25 years after Zora. She took a camera into many of those communities and filmed the informants and them telling the stories and whatnot. So she was very avant-garde in that.
Coming back in 1939, she'd find her favorite teacher, Dwight Holmes, was now the president of the college.
He invites her to the school to help to receive the honorary degree. So you could see that President Holmes had actually orchestrated this whereby she would be able to come back and meet some of the people that she had interacted with, almost 20 years before.
Maybe, coming back, Hurston would give herself a moment to remember all the stories she had set down since her school days.
Oh, she wrote somewhere. She was delighted. She was delighted and just overwhelmed with the honor. Very pleased to have the honor, yes.
More than the ceremony, Hurston's legacy would live on in the thrill her stories gave to readers. In the end, Hurston skipped the ceremony for her honorary degree. For Zora, it was enough to know about it. After all, she was never tied to other people's timetables.
I have been in sorrow's kitchen and licked out all the pots. Then I have stood on the peaky mountain wrapped in rainbows with a harp and a sword in my hands.